Um, um, I'm just getting a notification that our connection is unstable. Not sure what. Keep going. Thanks for joining. Posts as usual. Put in your questions, comments in the chats. We're on Instagram and on TikTok at the minute. And feel free to share, like, and all that good stuff. I'm a bit under pressure today for time, to be honest. I have to get down to the Dáil to ask a question about what's happening in Tara Mines. People might have seen it. Over 600 workers are due to be placed on so-called temporary redundancy by their multinational company. There's no indication of when they'll get their jobs back. They work in Tara Mines, obviously a zinc mine. So I'll be raising a question to say what the government doing to try and defend those jobs, to ensure people are paid in full, and to support the call from Unite the Union that the government needs to say if these jobs aren't kept, then the state will move to take the mine into public ownership. It's actually a vital natural resource, as well as being a source of important employment in the community. In any case, what I wanted to focus on for the maybe 15 minutes or so that we have here is, like I'm sure you can guess, the RTE scandal, which is really the only thing that people are talking about at the moment. I presume people are, a fair bit of familiarity in terms of what's beginning to be revealed. It kind of started with the revelation of secret payment, €75,000 a year to Ryan Tubridy, taking his total payment a year to over €500,000. That was very clearly and very consciously done in a way to hide it, to deceive the public. Effectively, for the first year, that money was laundered through a car company, Renault, and then the other years it was just done directly, but like off balance sheet in this so-called barter account. Then it turns out there's kind of 3 barter accounts and is used as a slush fund, paying $5,000 on flip-flops, high-end fancy flip-flops, I have no doubt. $4,200 on membership of this fancy club in a Soho club in London, and all of this contrasts with the treatment of ordinary workers. Freelancers get as little as €120 for like loads of work on producing a package. You have loads of workers in RTE on bogus self-employment contracts, having pay cuts imposed on them, job losses, treated horrendously, and those at the very top who are referred to by the top management as the talent, treated extremely well. So I think it's a scandal in and of itself. It's also a mirror of the class society we have in general, whereby those at the top of the very wealthiest, very highest paid, very richest see themselves as the talent and see everybody else as just the work. They're not talented. Not the people who make the stages, the camera operators, sound operators, the producers, the researchers, all the work that goes in, that they're not the talent. It is interesting. I mean, what about the politicians' wages? Exactly. These are all corrupt? No, but absolutely right about the politicians' wages, something we talk about all the time. We don't take the big TD wages. We take only the wages of an average worker. But it raises a broader question about pay caps for politicians. We think all politicians should be on the wage of an average worker, but pay caps in RTE across the public sector, nobody needs to be on and should be on more than €100,000. That is a huge amount of money. Someone said there, and I think they have a point, that it's a distraction. I don't think it is a distraction. I think it genuinely is a scandal. I think people are right to be outraged, but I think it's true that establishment politicians are happy enough about this crisis at the moment. In the short term, they're happy that someone other than them and their policies and their activities and behaviour is the focus of attention and public criticism, and they're happy to put the boot in. But in the medium to long term, they also would have an agenda of running down public service broadcasting, breaking it up, and ultimately privatising it. There was a story in the Mail on Sunday which pointed towards this, which then the government said, no, that's not true, but it's not coming from nowhere. That's the direction that they would like to go. So I think it is important when discussing the scandal to see where did this come from. Someone said, "Oh, this is public sector, wasting money or whatever." But actually, if you look at it, where it came from is from the commercial side of RTE. So RTE isn't just a public broadcast, but they also have this commercial side. They get about 200 million euros a year from the licence fee, which is a regressive, unjust tax, same for everybody regardless of income, and about 150 million euros from ad revenue. And it was the commercial side, that's where the rot set in and then spread throughout the top of RTE. That's what the slush fund was used in terms of bringing people to rugby, fancy dinners, all of that. Executives from companies in the hope of getting them to bring their advertising. That's where the justification for the extraordinary salaries. Brian Tubridy at the very top, over 500,000, including the secret payment. It's like, oh, well, these people bring in advertising. So having this commercial side to RTE has been utterly corrosive to its duty as a public service broadcaster. We do need public service broadcasting. I think it's more important than ever in a world dominated by social media giants owned by multi-billionaires who are happy for disinformation and propaganda to kind of flourish. So we need, genuinely independent public service broadcasting with a commitment to giving people, real accurate information. That means not distorted by being sponsored by and getting free cars and all this kind of stuff, and then providing very bad coverage of the climate catastrophe we're experiencing, for example. It means for us pay caps throughout RTE, as I mentioned. It means an end to the system of Ryan Tubridy presenting himself as not being employed by RTE. He's a contractor, which enables him to avoid tax and then have all these side commercial deals. Democratise RTE. So instead of the majority of the board are appointed by the government, instead of that, we should have representatives of workers, representatives of the viewing public, and our underrepresented communities at the heart of RTE. And then get rid of this commercial side of RTE, get rid of the licence fee, which is this unjust, regressive tax, and then fund it properly through a tax on the major social media giants, a digital services tax, and to ensure that we can have proper public service broadcasting. Questions coming in here. Eamon, why haven't the government sanctioned Israel? Because Israel is very clearly supported by US imperialism, and the government doesn't want to upset the US, is like the blunt, straight answer. That's why. Scandalous, horrendous actions this week. 12 people, including multiple children, were killed by Israel. The government's able to have words of criticism. They were doing it just there in leaders' questions, actually. But they won't follow through. They won't follow through with recognising the Palestinian state. They won't follow through with the recommendations from Amnesty, for example, of treating Israel like the apartheid state it is. They won't follow through in terms of getting rid of the preferential access that Israel gets to European markets. They won't follow through with the Occupied Territories Bill because they just don't want to upset the apple cart in the European Union or with the US. Lost your train of thought there, yup, Niall Boylan. The question here, is it because the US has a huge overrepresentation of Jewish citizens in its government? No, I don't think that's the reason. I think that's fundamentally anti-Semitic to say that people's views of the reason that the US imperialism is supports Israel or whatever is because of Jewish people. It's not. It's because it serves their geopolitical interests. Israel is an ally and a friend of US imperialism in a region which is rich in natural resources. And it's for that reason that Israel supports, or that the US supports Israel. Would Sinn Féin recognise Palestine if they get in? I certainly hope so. We certainly will be pushing for them to do that. The West with NATO is a puppet to the US, broadly speaking, yeah. What can we do as ordinary people do more to help Palestinians? Is there specific charities? There are. The main thing I'd encourage people to do, though, is get involved in campaigning. Join the Ireland-Palestine Solidarity campaign. There was an important protest in immediate reaction to the attacks on Jenin on Tuesday night. Follow what's happening in Palestine. Spread the word about what's happening in Palestine. What do we believe needs to be done for retaining Irish nurses here in Ireland? Pay them properly, treat them properly, and tackle the housing crisis so that they're not having to spend all their money on housing. I mean, I think that's, you know, that's it. That's horrendous. What Kelly's saying there, my son is 8 and autistic, has no school place for September, being refused from over 14 schools. That's absolutely horrendous. If you want to actually email me on paul.murphy@oireachtas.ie or paul.murphy@oir.ie with the details, we can put in a query and try and put pressure. Obviously this is, you know, the amount of schools, and as you get older, so as you go to kind of the second half of primary school, there's less places with ASD units, and then secondary schools even less again. So you've kind of a real barrier. Absolutely horrendous. Do I still work in Tesco? I don't work in Tesco anymore. I did briefly work in Tesco. Any protest for the TV licence? I certainly think the TV licence needs to go, all right. Absolutely. How do you intend on growing the number of PPPTDs? By getting more people to vote for us, basically. That's our genius idea. Yeah. Thanks for the cap. What about legalising cannabis? Yes, we support that. There was something worrying yesterday, actually, where Gino Kenny was asking about the Taoiseach about the Citizens' Assembly on drugs, and he made a point of saying, well, kind of regardless of what they recommend, it doesn't mean we'll necessarily do it. So we've gone to this big effort of like setting up this Citizens' Assembly, get 100 people together, random citizens, get their views, get them to listen to people, and like recommend what should happen. And now they're saying in advance doesn't mean we'll necessarily do it. How do you propose to tackle the housing crisis? Very good, and probably the most important political question in this country right now. How you tackle the housing crisis. Step 1, reinstate the eviction ban. I just had an engagement with the Minister for Housing this morning about this, where he's trying to claim, oh, the numbers aren't that bad when there's like a record number of people who are homeless. Reinstate it, stop the flood of people into homelessness. That doesn't tackle the housing crisis in and of itself, that's not what we're saying, but it stops people entering homelessness right now. Rent controls to bring rents down to an affordable level, and then use the vacant properties. I mean, we have 50,000 homes vacant for 6 years or more. So like retrofit those, bring those into use as quickly as possible, and then a state construction company to build social and affordable housing on a massive scale. Obviously, we have more detail on all of that on our website. Question came in, good question on Instagram. How should RTE be funded if TV licence goes alongside ad revenue? So what I was saying earlier is the idea of a digital services tax, which you have in many countries. A tax on the big social media giants. For a 1% tax would more than cover, it would increase the budget of RTE in reality and allow us to have proper public service broadcasting. Will any TD stand up for animal welfare as worse as ever been in this country? I certainly agree it's very bad. I definitely try to stand up for animal welfare. I've had a bill, for example, to ban hair coursing, which has been in this lottery system in the Dáil. It's been there for like years. I must be, in terms of this, the most unlucky TD. It's been sitting there for like literally years and hasn't been picked out, unfortunately. So I'm hoping that will come up in the second half of this year. I think that'll be important. I'm also working on a bill at the moment, an animal sentience bill, to recognise the sentience of animals. Sorry, I'm trying to flick through these. Why do we need public service broadcasting? Good question. News is available from so many sources. That's true. But they all have agendas and have bias and so on. I'm not saying RTE is free of bias either, to be clear. But if you get all your news from stations that are owned by the likes of Rupert Murdoch, billionaires who have an agenda, or through social media that is owned by billionaires, be it Mark Zuckerberg or Elon Musk or whoever, that's a very dangerous thing. These people have an agenda, and that agenda affects the news that they present, how they present it. It's not just the opinion pieces, it's in the news itself. Read the Sunday Independent. You know what I mean? Sunday Independent has a very clear anti-Sinn Féin, anti-left agenda. Like, it's very blatant. I said this, and actually the Sunday Independent editor went mad about it, but that article had, that edition of the Sunday Independent where he went mad, had loads of articles just attacking Sinn Féin and attacking the left. So because that's part of a big multinational corporation, and they represent the interests, or they're part of the rich in this country, and they espouse views that will enhance the interests of the rich, have ordinary people divided and so on. So I think you need genuinely public, independent, so not dictated by the government obviously, broadcasting which is not infected by the agenda of the
rich. Is that Spicebag's picture behind me? It is. And we had Spicebag do a very good meeting with us in Tala last week. He was excellent. I think if you go to my Facebook page and probably elsewhere, you'll be able to watch the live feed. It was really interesting, actually. One of the funniest things he said was that when he had never heard of Fionn Sheahan, who's one of the editors of the Independent. You know that clip when he was on TV3 that he was expecting to go up against, because I think Ivan Yates was on that night as well, or George Hook, one of those. And but he never heard of this guy Fionn Sheahan, and then they had a very funny engagement where your man really lost it, like, you know, was it political art? Anyway, you should go and watch. That was a funny question there about Micheál Martin. I'm not going to answer it, but it is a funny question. The ordinary people don't care about RTE or Tubridy. I don't know. I think people do care. I mean, I take your opinion that they don't. You're obviously an ordinary person. You don't care. But I get the impression that people do care, because I think people are rightly outraged about it. Sorry, to be more serious, and then I got to finish. I know this is shorter than normal. I just have to run down to the Dáil, unfortunately, to ask this question. On how we intend to grow the PPP vote is like by campaigning on the issues that matter to people. Driving force behind the cost of living coalition. There's a really important demonstration coming up on the 7th of October. If you Google it, you'll check out details. Trying to build a movement on the housing crisis, trying to build a movement on the environmental crisis, and putting forward socialist policies that, you know, meet the needs of ordinary people, and then getting organised across the country. So what we need above all is ordinary people to join, become activists in People Before Profit. So if you're interested, definitely do. Do I still sing the praises of Syriza? I do not. Syriza unfortunately sold out what they were voted for. They betrayed that, like, very blatantly. That's what they did. I think it was a good thing that people had a chance to elect a left government, but then they completely betrayed people. Unfortunately, that can happen in politics. It means we have to build a movement in this country that learns the lessons, that is prepared to tackle capitalism, that is prepared to stand up to the European Union, which would say, no, you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do the other. And that's why we need to build a real eco-socialist movement. Right, I am sorry to go early today. I'll be back next week and we go again. And try and deal with some of the questions I haven't got to now. There's loads of questions, so I am sorry about that. Take care. Nice to talk to you all. Bye bye.